On this day of remembrance and solemn reflection, as Rotarians, may we be reminded of our commitment to international peace and understanding. When there is so much sickness and suffering, so much ignorance and misunderstanding, so much hatred and violence left in this world, may each of us, through the grace given us in our own ways and through the civic organization, become an instrument of your peace, dear God, until the day that all men and women and nations cease from their selfish or self-righteous or arrogant striving for domination, and your kingdom of peace is established. Amen. Amen.
John Ross, song of the day.
The song of the day, but you know, after listening to Cliff's prayer, could we just take a moment maybe and just contemplate what Cliff said, just take a moment of silence, remember the victims, and most of all, remember the people they left behind.
You got it. I got it. If you want, I turned it on. You want to? Because you probably have to swing in that direction.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, Tony Reed has our visiting Rotarians.
We have from Lake Hickory, we have Jim Wentworth, Nancy Meek, Lloyd Lucas, Lou Westmore, and Mark Sinclair.
Okay, any guests of Rotarians on the right-hand side? Yeah, Linda.
This is Mark Harrison, Outsourcing Pros Incorporated General Manager.
Hey, welcome, Mark. Anybody else on the right? How about the center? And left side? Any guests? Okay. Mark, thank you for being here. David Milholland, Rotary Moment.
Okay, birthdays. The 15th is Walter Hart. The 15th, Robert Welch. 15th, Bob Singletary. 17th is Phil Carter. And 17th is Rosemary Bettis. Bob Holland is still recovering in Raleigh with his daughter and finished his last chemo treatment. And look for his address in the spokes next week. Bob Hambrick is having throat problems, and George Furlong just got home from the hospital. There were 3 men on a hill with their watches. The first man threw his watch down the hill and it broke. The second man threw his watch down the hill and it broke. The third man threw his watch down the hill, walked all the way to the bottom and caught it. The other 2 were puzzled and asked the third man how he did it. The third man said, "Easy. My watch is 5 minutes slow."
Applause is accepted. That's fine. Okay, there will be a membership committee meeting after the meeting today in the back corner. Membership, if you're on that committee, be there. Brief meeting. Let's see. Cliff, you have an announcement.
Okay, on everybody's table is a poster. Mount Olive Lutheran Church is having a 5K run at a festival on Saturday. If you'd like to come out and run, come to a yard sale, eat a lot, have music, do a lot of stuff, have fun. Oh, and you can actually have your blood pressure checked for free, starting at 6 in the morning. If you don't want to get up at 6, you'll be there for
Okay. Also, I want you to remember the Cycle Challenge, Carolina Cycle Challenge. That's October 5th. So just in a few weeks, we have 22 people signed up. Jill Patton is putting our part of the thing together. She has had a meeting on details about we're going to be out on the course. The list is still here, so we want you to sign up if you have not. We need all the volunteers that we can get, and otherwise hope you'll ride or sponsor in that. And that event is eligible for your volunteer hours as well. So that's the 5th. Be sure that you're ready for that and sign up if you have not. The Charitable Giving Committee met for the first time this week, and as I've mentioned, we're going to try to be giving away money a little quicker than we did last year. Since we already have the money, we don't need to wait till next May to give it away. So we tweaked the application just a little bit, and that is online, and you want to get the word out to different groups that you feel like are doing something that's in the realm of what we are looking at. You know, basically early childhood education is our foremost thing, and then we'll take other things related to that education, and then they can apply. Anybody can apply, but they have the most chance of getting it. So that committee will be meeting on a regular basis. Give us about a week, I think, to make sure. I think, Lamar, you said you had it redone, but you know, if it's ready,
on the website.
It is ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's ready to go on the website in its amended form. There were some dates and things we had to make changes on. So if you know of some groups that are looking for, or that you think would be really good recipients, then steer them to that so we can get that as many as possible in there. Okay. Any other announcements? Anything? Okay. Well, Shuford Abernathy will introduce the program.
Thank you, David. It's good to be up here today and good to be able to give you this program. It's always amazing to me to be a resident of this county and all the things that are going on, sometimes that are just slightly under the radar. And for me, this was something that was under the radar for a long time, but it kept coming up in several different ways. I have served on the Historical Association board here. The Carolina Thread Trail came up as a part of Murray's Mill, came up as a part of the Bunker Hill Covered Bridge. I'm working with the city of Newton about the possibility of starting another retirement townhome community near the government center in Newton. Carolina Thread Trail came up as a part of that. And so I had met Chris Timberlake through that process, and we realized it really is something the greater community needs to know something about. There's a lot of discussion about initiatives that are going on to help us economically. I think the Carolina Thread Trail has a lot of things that it can do for this county. But I want to introduce someone else besides Chris to start with. Many of you know Ann Gaither. Ann serves on, I may not be getting this exactly right, but the governing board for the Carolina Thread Trail, which meets in Charlotte. So I'm going to introduce Ann to give you a little bit of information from that perspective and then to introduce Chris.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I was pleased when I was invited to come and speak because you're right, the Thread Trail is under the radar, and I hope after today it may be peaking up just a little bit and we can get some of you all interested. I was pleased when they asked me to be the Catawba County representative on the Thread Trail governing body, because I don't feel until you have a local representative that you have a voice at the table. And that's only happened in the last year. I'm the first representative from Catawba County. I've been here almost a year and I'm still trying to get my arms around how to get other people involved in the process. But just a bit about the Thread Trail. When they asked me to be on the board, I was pleased because I believe in conservation. I believe in a safe place, green space to exercise, or safe place, waterway like the South Fork to exercise. And I believe in the organizations that say clean air, clean water, and exercise. So that sort of fit. There are 15 counties that compose the Carolina Thread Trail. Most of them are in North Carolina, a few in South Carolina. And the hub is Charlotte, and that's where the offices are. And my role as your representative is to meet with the elected city and county officials, to meet with their planners, and then with the advice and staff expertise of the Thread Trail employees to help set priorities and help develop new projects. So that's my focus. And Chris Timberlake is the chief planner for Catawba County. Chris is one of those guys that does everything. He's our boots on the ground. He sits behind the desk and researches who owns what property, where and how and when. He's a trail master, and I'm not sure of all that entails. I'm sure he can tell you, but what that really says is that he's made a commitment. He's not just sitting talking about doing the things that the Thread Trail does. He actually does it. So with no more ado, I'd like for Chris to tell you about the exciting things that are happening in Catawba County and things we hope to happen. Thank you.
I hear this mic moves, and I'm glad because my arm is just not this long. Please feel free, to go ahead and turn your chairs. And I want to first thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you all as well. Talk a little bit about the Carolina Thread Trail, maybe how we got where we are today with an adopted plan, what it means hopefully for Catawba County and the municipalities moving forward. It's a pleasure to be with all of you, and it is kind of under the radar. The plan was adopted in 2010, and here we are 4 years later. We do have some trail on the ground in Catawba County if you're not familiar with it, and I'll kind of hit those highlights as we go through. But just as Anna was saying, conservation, exercise, what it means to all of us, the beautiful picture here, and obviously not every portion of Carolina Thread Trail will look like this, but certainly some do start to mimic that. So just to sum things up, planning as an occupation, and what we're about as planners, and the thought of the Carolina Thread Trail, quality of life. Not to pick on anyone, myself included, but some of the things that we look at even here in Catawba County, overweight and obesity, and what that means towards health. 38% of children 2 to 18 years old are considered overweight in Catawba County. That's over 1/3. 72% of adults are considered overweight, not maybe necessarily obese, but overweight. And that rate has risen 60% since 2006. That rate has also tripled nationally over the last 40 years. And of course, obesity, being overweight, that's the second leading cause in preventable death. So just thinking about what it means to be able to get outside, to exercise, to walk on sidewalks and trails, and to offer that opportunity. Not to paint doom and gloom, but you all know it. You're business leaders, you're in the community, you're activists, to talk about the economy, which is on everybody's minds. We're 12th out of 14 of the metropolitan statistical area, still at 7.1% unemployment. Thankfully, that has dropped, but as you can see, we're still behind a lot of other MSAs. There are many positive aspects to trails, to greenways, and there are a considerable number of studies that show when you have trails and greenways that they bring in business, their businesses expand, and they have positive impacts on the communities. We also find that there are studies that talk about increased property values, so there are a great number of economic benefits to having trails. Real quickly, environmental quality, trees, establishing corridors where they're not being developed, maybe preserving streams and buffers. You can imagine the environmental quality and the increase there. And just preserving history and a sense of place for people. All those kind of relate back to quality of life and what that means to all of us here in Catawba County and the Hickory area and other municipalities. Just to tell you quickly, if somebody will keep up with time and maybe flag me down, I will do my best to try to get you all back to work. And talk about where the Carolina Thread Trail came from. 2009. Carolina Thread Trail is a nonprofit organization out of the Conservancy in Charlotte. There was a vision to connect 15 counties throughout North Carolina and South Carolina. This goes south of Charlotte, and with trail, not necessarily and sidewalk and different types of connectors that would connect not only those regions but 2.3 million people in that area. All that's being funded by private donations, some state and federal funding. Each county that participated basically received approximately $300,000 in the pot. Catawba County used $60,000 of that to go towards the actual plan process to adopt the plan. And to date, we've spent around $234,000 for some planning, some design, some actual construction of trails. So we had a small amount to begin with. It's going to take much more to actually achieve our goals in Catawba County. But certainly one of the reasons that we're out here today, not necessarily to beg for money, but to just raise awareness, and hopefully we can come together, as groups to kind of realize and champion the Carolina Thread Trail and what it means for our community. This is a map of those 15 counties. And you can see Catawba County up in the top. I'm used to northwest there, but in the trail, the corridor that has been adopted, that's a quarter-mile corridor. And the theory there behind that is somewhere within that corridor, hopefully we can achieve property owners that would be interested in assigning easements for trail construction in those areas. So just to talk a little bit about the planning process, as I said, Catawba County obtained the grant. There was a 32-member committee that was part of that. It included citizens, county representatives, city representatives, folks that were just interested in trails, different activists. And we talked with Duke Energy because, as you know, Hickory licensing coming up. Duke has planned to do some improvements there along the Catawba corridor. So they began, all that kicked off in November of 2009. There were steering committees. We studied a lot of the long-range plans that we have in place that have currently been adopted, where are existing parks, looked at sidewalk plans, areas that we could actually use that were already constructed. Looked at capital improvement plans, so where are dollars at, where can we spend money in the future, and what are, I guess, our hurdles that we would have to cross there in terms of finances. And we looked at existing maps, where schools are located, where there are historical, cultural sites, rivers, places of interest. Part of that was also to target, as we met with groups and kind of gauged where the public wanted to be. We looked at areas that were some of the historic areas that were, I guess, visited a lot: Murray's Mill, Bunker Hill Covered Bridge, different museums, the Salt Block, Hart Square. Are there ways to connect those areas with that Carolina Thread Trail, places that people wanted to visit a lot? We looked at issues, and we looked at various types of users. Obviously, there are different types of trail, there are different desires, whether it's somebody walking or running on the trail, maybe someone wants to ride a bike. Maybe there are people, and there are, that want to ride horses on the trail. So you have to look at, there are different dynamics towards trail construction, and then where you could establish certain areas for those types of trail. And then there's any number of issues, from funding to private property rights, because we're not looking to take land, but we're looking for it to be offered, someone willing. Now, it may be purchased, but we're still looking at asking property owners if they would be willing to buy into that. Looking at liability, where or not there are liability issues. Rail conversion, one of the things that certainly some of you probably are familiar with, the rail trails, and up in Abingdon, in that area in Virginia, with the Virginia Creeper Trail. Obviously, through the planning process, community engagement is one of those things, and it's interesting, we're kind of under the radar, but we actually did have public meetings where we held meetings in Catawba County, in the Hickory area, and tried to survey folks. It's just hard to get the word out sometimes to gauge and gather that community input. But what we wanted to look at there, not only are those places, but how do we connect and how do we get there? And so we had folks drawing lines on the maps. And you can see it looked like, spaghetti being thrown on the plate. And at some point you have to say, there's only so much money. What really makes sense? What do we think we can do? I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself, but I'll just mention there's 216 miles planned in the corridor plan itself. There are about another 127 of secondary routes that are proposed. Thinking about route development, so that map with spaghetti and everything, we actually did some ground truthing after that. Actually got out, looked at areas, properties to see, if it makes sense. Are we in a floodplain? Can we build trail there? Will it be sustainable? Are there other reasons why we can't put trail in certain areas that people would like to see trails? Through those meetings, those interest groups and the forums, there was a little bit of work done and some survey work. Come to find out, and it's not necessarily surprising, I've seen this several times myself, but undeveloped trail, natural surface trail, going out through the woods or a forested area, that on the far left there, that is the most desirable. On the far right, the sidewalk system happened to be least desirable, and that was what came out. Now, I use them all, but I have found, and you can imagine yourself, being outside in the middle of July on a sidewalk, it's going to be a little bit warmer than walking on a natural trail going through a wooded area. You might save yourself 10 degrees. So there was a lot of information that came from those surveys at those public forums. As I said, I overshot that. I said 200. There's 126 miles of primary route in Catawba County and 112 miles of secondary route. So that might be other greenways that municipalities have actually established as part of that. The adoptive plan would actually put people, a third of the county residents, and that includes residents that are in municipalities, within a half mile of the trail route. So that's getting people connected to that trail once it's built. There are lots of different types of trails. One of the things I'll talk about in a few minutes is blueways. So the number of corridors that we have in that adopted plan, there's riparian, which would be a blueway, and 23% road right-of-ways, 21% sidewalks. Hickory has around 23 miles of sidewalks, I think, that are existing, that are already Carolina Thread Trail, and we're working to actually sign that and establish it so that folks are aware that, hey, I'm getting out, I'm on the sidewalk, and I'm on the Carolina Thread Trail. So it's all part of raising awareness. I have copies of this today, but this is the map, the adopted map with the primary route that's in pink, and the green route is the secondary route that's in green there. Kind of a relationship to parks and some historic areas and where they're geographically located in the county. There are 5 phases to the action plan, but they're not all individual. In other words, you don't move from one to the other to get to the end. Some of them are kind of simultaneous and some of them are ongoing. Obviously, one of the things that I'm doing here today is building community support. I mean, that started in 2009, trying to draft the plan that was adopted in 2010, but it really is ongoing. Completing top priority segments, some of that has been done, but it's yet to be fully accomplished. Looking at available funding, as I said, we're down now, if you do the math, to somewhere around $64,000 left available for whether it's land acquisition, some design work, maybe there's a bridge that needs to be designed by an engineer, and then construction. A lot of the construction, when you're talking about natural trail, is done by volunteers, but not in all cases can we do that. Sometimes we have to use some sidewalk to connect, and we can't necessarily use volunteers to do that. Acquisition options, there's still, a lot of this is ongoing. One of the things that we like to do, you see Murray's Mill out to the right there, the Heritage Trail in Newton out to the left, and the Gateway Trail on the bottom of the screen. Once that trail is established, we like to sign it somehow, give some demarcation of the trail itself, kind of have a ribbon cutting open to the public and to the elected officials and get everyone out to try to communicate, where we're heading and what we're doing. For more information, obviously, our adopted plan is on the county's website. You're welcome to look at carolinathreadtrail.org. They have a great interactive map. So depending on where you happen to be, let's say you're down somewhere in Charlotte, you can plug into the map there and you can find a trail that might be in your locale at that particular time. And there's a little bit of information about the trail. Is it 2.3 miles long? Is it a half mile? Just to give you an idea. And you can do all that looking for location. You can get an idea of difficulty. Is it easy? Is it moderate? That type of thing. Most of the trail is easy to moderate, just to mention that. So what is established right now, aside from the sidewalk system that's in Hickory? Conover's Greenway that you're probably familiar with up there just outside of Conover heading towards I-40. You have the Hickory Greenway that's in the park system. Newton Heritage Trail, you know, kind of mentioned Newton Heritage Trail, it coexists with Carolina Thread Trail. It's kind of like I-40 and I-85 when they come together within the same corridor. And the Murray's Mill, David Lee Stewart Trail out by the mill there. So we have 4 segments that are actually signed and noted today. This is a project, I'll get into just a couple of quick projects that we're in the process of. This is in Newton, the Government Center Trail, if you want to call it that, but this will connect over to the west, to the left there. This will connect, this is the Heritage Trail that's in Newton, runs north-south. There'll be a natural trail that goes through the Government Center property. Beautiful area. It's north-facing slope. It's a microclimate. There's rhododendron, mountain laurel in that area. It's really neat. You don't always find it in this area. Natural surface trail, and it will connect back to sidewalk that we're establishing along that road. And there's sidewalk already in the area. And Schufer could probably tell you later. You know, there's future plans for development in this area. There's some sidewalks already existing, so that offers great connectivity for future developments and to get uptown to Newton, and just a chance for folks on the property that work in the area to get out and get a little bit of exercise. Believe it or not, county employees, they're privately insured, or self-insured, I should say. Another of interest is Bunker Hill. The county and the Historic Association is working very hard to secure and take care of Bunker Hill Covered Bridge for the long term, and some grants have been approved and awarded to take care of that. We're also in the process, the Conservation Fund has granted the state the property around the Bunker Hill Covered Bridge, and so our intention there is to develop a memorandum of understanding with the state whereby we would do some park improvements there and also establish trail from the covered bridge heading towards the rest stop that's along I-40. So we hope to have that established. There's quite a few priorities, but the areas that we're working in, I mentioned Blue Ways, the South Fork River, it's established, it's there. One of the things, and the Conservation Fund actually owns a considerable amount, over 100 acres of property along that corridor. One thing that they're looking at is the ability just to use the river as a Blue Way, canoe and kayak. How do they access the river? Is there a property owner that would be willing to allow an easement so that you could establish some parking area and then a canoe and kayak launch? There's one outside of Newton at the Jacobs Fork Park, but that's to the north, and now we'd like to have something to the south. I mentioned the Government Center property, what's going on there with that little half-mile connector. But what I failed to mention was from I-10 to, from Highway 10 in Newton up to I-40 in Conover. That's 6.3 miles. So we're establishing a half-mile section there on the Government Center property. And once that missing link is complete, we have 6.3 miles of trail that is continuous from Newton up to I-40 in Conover. And also the Bunker Hill. So those are 3 priorities right now that we're working towards. Ann mentioned Certified Trail Master. Well, what did that take? I think I spent roughly a week sitting down with a gentleman who got started with the International Mountain Bike Association when the Olympics came to Atlanta some years ago. And through his workings with establishing trail and I guess the Mountain Bike Association, they have come up with what it means to design and construct sustainable trails. Some of that is not necessarily necessary in places where you have sidewalk, but where you don't have sidewalk and when you're going through the woods, you want to make sure that your design and your construction is something that you're not always out there having to maintain. So it takes a considerable amount of time to understand and then design trail location so that we're not out there spending extra dollars and spending extra time. I liken it to, once the trail's established, I'd rather be walking on it than having to continue to build it and maintain it. So I spent about a week working to become a certified trail master. The Carolina Thread Trail sponsors a little education opportunity once a year whereby folks can fill out a little application and hopefully moving forward, we'll have others in the Catawba County or the municipality area that will also take that course and become familiar with how to design and lay out and build and lead volunteer groups to construct a trail. So what are we here for? I guess we're looking for volunteers. We're looking for folks to be interested, to buy into Carolina Thread Trail and what it could mean, the benefits to all of us, not only from a health aspect, but economically as well, preserve our historic spaces and our natural spaces. And so volunteers is a great thing. You can go to Carolina Thread Trail. They have a little site there where you can get involved, you can volunteer. Not only in Catawba County area, but we've had folks that come from Charlotte. I go to Charlotte and Fort Mill area and Cabarrus County to work on trail there. So it's really neat to see the various areas around us in a regional aspect and what's going on in those areas as well. I'll just wrap up by trying to host and ask for questions and answer the questions that I can. My name, contact information is there. I'll be more than happy to try to meet with anyone and maybe another group or another opportunity to reach out to folks. I mentioned there's some brochures, there's a plan here if anyone wants to take a look at that. There's the adopted map. Feel free to take a look at any of that, and I'll kind of open it up for questions. Yes, sir.
Any plan of connecting any of our county parks into this trail?
There are, and the map, I go the right direction here. That was one of the things coming out of that the steering committees and working with the public forums was looking at the existing park systems that we have, whether they're municipalities or the county, and trying to establish those corridors, such as the Baker's Mountain area, trying to establish a corridor that would link people to the existing parks, and even the planned parks. There's a park that's the county received monies to acquire 600 acres. It would be called the Mountain Creek Park there in the Sherrills Ford area. The trail would go through that area at some point, we hope. Yes, ma'am.
The Boost Hickory effort has some trails, I know, a river walk. Is there connection? Are y'all?
One of the things that we would probably have to do because of when this plan was adopted, and you're right, thank you for that. I meant to mention, inspiring spaces, innovate Catawba, and certainly what that means for all of us, again, equality of life, from a personal and a planning perspective. In going through the planning process, that hadn't come forward yet. Plans are fluid though, and so we'll go back to drawing boards. We may need to amend the plan to capture some of those spaces in the future. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
You got any relationship at all with the Mountain Sea Trail?
In Catawba County, it does not, but there are sections at the county border, at the county line, where we're trying to save forward and make connections to other counties, such as Alexander, which at some point, hopefully, there would be established connections to the Mountains to Sea Trail. Yes, sir. Yes?
Where does the name Carolina Thread Trail come from?
Carolina Thread Trail. Carolina, I think, obviously, maybe because it originated, most of our area is in Carolina. If you look at the logo, and there's a copy of it, an image on the bulletin there. The thought there is trying to connect those 15 counties, the region, and 2.3 million people. And if you think about a quilt, what it takes to put a quilt patchwork together. Carolina thread, so the thread, in a sense, being the trail weaving throughout the communities, and then trail. So I'd have to say that's as best I could tell you, that's where it comes from.
I just wondered if it had any connection to the textile industry that was so much a part of it.
There could be some connection to that. I know Belmont and Gaston County, that Carolina Thread Trail certainly goes through there, so it's very possible. Other questions? I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. Like I said, you all are business leaders. I think we can use you as champions. Hopefully we can connect or reach out to continue. Hopefully today, after the discussions, you see the benefit and understand the benefit not only to our health, but economically in the Carolina Thread Trail. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Chris, and we'd like to give you a copy of our four-way test that we use as our creed, and hope you'll have that properly displayed. Thank you for being here. Doug Rongo, as he comes forward for our raffle. Remember the membership meeting in the back right-hand corner after the meeting. Mark, thank you for being here today. Hope you'll come back. Rotarians Jim, Nancy, Lou, Mark, and Floyd, thanks for making up here. And you want to pick one there?
I'm sorry. You got any stats? I didn't. 36 cards, one joker, like $85 for one.
1,126 in the pot, 85 today, 36 cards.
Yes, and one joker.
And a joker. Okay, 552-732. 552-732. All right.
You got that.
Well, close but no cigars. Free lunch right there.
Good job, John.
Thank you. Okay, any other announcements? If you will, rise with me. Join with the four-way test. Of the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth? Care of all concerned, will build good, better friendships, will be beneficial